Good morning, the good people of Nigeria. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on the hour and the location you are. Today, I want to show you some videos that has projected about the outcome of this coming election, 2023 general presidential election. Because this poll was conducted in rural areas where these candidates this is not their origin state or their origin village. The poll was conducted from outside their origin state to show their acceptability and maybe the love for the people for them. So this poll was conducted by an agency called Nestia. You understand? Who conducted this poll, and this poll was conducted in a very lovely manner. So I want to show you the poll and the prediction about the forthcoming election and who might win or who is likely to win the election. But as we pray and we believe God that our candidate, His Excellency Peter Obi, must surely win the forthcoming election because he's the most credible, knowledgeable, competent, compassionate leader among all them all. He and Obidati, they are the most eligible candidates to win the forthcoming election. Just watch out the video. And nevertheless, don't fail to like, share, please share. Like, comment, because your comment is important to us. God bless you. Watch.
Predictions from different groups and individuals about who will win the presidential election. Some have used the strength of each candidate regionally to arrive at their results, while others have used social media platforms to conduct polls to work out how the electorate will vote in 2023. One of such groups that have analyzed how the presidential election will play out is Next Year Consulting, which conducted a face-to-face poll of registered voters in rural communities in 12 states in Nigeria. The group's report breaks down how the top 4 presidential candidates will fare in the coming election. Also, from its report, 3 out of 4 Nigerians believe the country is headed in the wrong direction, and also focus on key issues that could shape the 2023 presidential election. Joining us on this show this morning, right now, as we discuss this report collated by Next Year Consulting, is Patrick Okigbo III, policy analyst and founding partner Next Year. Welcome to the morning show, Patrick.
Thank you, Ruben.
Okay, quickly. We have this report that you have just released, 2023 presidential elections, electoral poll of rural communities in Nigeria. Sample size of 2,012 states, focusing majorly on the leading political parties, but specifically the People's Democratic Party and the APC. Could you just take us through this report and some of your findings? And why rural communities? Why not the urban areas?
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thanks for making an opportunity for us to share this report. As you said in your introduction, we've seen many polls done in the lead up to the 2023 elections. Many of those polls were done by telephone and focused on city centers. And we thought that one addition or what's to plug the gap in the data we have is to focus a little bit on the rural communities, isolate the issues around social media and its influence on these elections. And that's why we chose rural communities. We chose to select 2 states from each of the geopolitical zones, 1 state each controlled by PDP and APC. We also excluded the home states of the leading presidential and vice presidential candidates in the poll. Sample size, as you said, 2,000, margin of error about 2.2% at the 95% confidence interval. And again, all the survey respondents are registered to vote in the 2023 elections. Now, what are some of the key findings? 3 out of 4 of the survey respondents, said that they believe the country is heading in the wrong direction. And this ratio cuts across all the age groups that we surveyed. Major issues that Nigerians have: insecurity, bad governance, unemployment, and weak economy. Those are the major issues, but there were a few other issues as well. And if you look at voting intention, across the different regions in the country, you find that the Peter Obi of the Labour Party leads on voting intention with 40.37%. Atiku Abubakar, 26.7%. Bola Tinubu, 20.47%. Rabiu Kwankwaso is at 5.16%. But what is most important, in my view, as we look at these numbers, is that you still have quite a large number of people who are undecided at about 7%. So that's something that these leading candidates could focus on. You take a regional view, there are no clear winners yet. Different candidates are strong in different regions. So if you take North Central, for instance, Peter Obi leads there. But if you go to Northeast and Northwest, Atiku Abubakar leads. Bola Tinubu playing a close second in those regions. If you go to the South and Southeast, Peter Obi leads in those regions. Southwest becomes very interesting because in Southwest, Bola Tinubu came in at about 37.4%. Peter Obi a close second at about 24%. But again, something interesting about the region, about 20% are undecided. About 20% in the Southwest undecided. And you go through in terms of people of education, in terms of age range, Peter Obi is preferred, mostly by the different age groups. Atiku Abubakar, highest preference amongst Muslims, while Peter Obi is preferred by respondents who choose to identify their religious affiliations. Same thing for educational attainment across the different levels of education. Peter Obi did well, with Atiku Abubakar and Bola Tinubu being preferred by respondents with no educational qualification or who chose not to mention their educational qualification. Same thing for employment status, and so on and so forth. Now, the last point I'd like to make is that about 83% of those polled said that their minds are made up. They're definite that they will not change their minds between now and election day. And finally, when we asked, how do you get your information on the different candidates? A large percentage of the respondents said they get it through radio, 32%, social media at 30%, and family and friends at 16.7%, and so on and so forth. Television came in fourth. At about 13%. So those were some of the key findings from the survey, and I'm happy to share more as we go along.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for breaking it down. It's interesting, just the last points you've made with regards to how people, the respondents, get their information. Top of it is traditional media, which is radio. And in a close second, the social media. This is quite instructive because when we've heard debates from principal partners from political parties running for presidency, in fact, they've often put down the influence of social media. However, we see that people actually are 29%, close to 30% of the respondents rely on social media. Would you classify this based on the age range of people that you polled? Why this strong leaning towards social media?
And it's actually more interesting because we focused on rural communities, right? And the way we define rural communities, we understand the classic definition of rural communities, everywhere that's outside the urban center. You can define it by distance from the urban center. You can define it by population size. One of the things we wanted really to test for is this story around the young people and the influence of social media. So we picked locations that are distant from urban centers, city centers. So we eliminated all city centers, and we also polled in only local communities where there are no tertiary institutions. Yeah, and it's interesting that social media still came a second, second to radio, and it cuts across most of the age groups, but mostly younger people. people. So the older people relied more on radio, they relied more on family and friends, but the younger generation, even in these rural communities, got their information from social media, which was quite interesting. But again, if you look at the number of, if you look at internet penetration in Nigeria, and you look at the number of cell phones, in the hands of people, you can begin to understand why some of those numbers hold out, even in rural communities.
Right. So I'd like to go back and dig into your methodology. What's your sample size like? And I'll also like you to expand on the conversation as regards demography. So you're saying this demography in the rural area. I mean, what's the demography? Was it a broad range of like your 18 to 52 or 65 or thereabouts? And what also informed your definition of terms for rural areas? So I'd like to know, for instance, the city, the rural towns and villages, you visited. Also, I could see that you had an allowance for your, margin of error. What informed that methodological interplay, for your margin of error? I saw your degree of confidence was very high, about like 96%. What are the variables, 95%, what are the variables, that counted for that?
Excellent. So our sample size was 2,000. And sometimes when we mention that we polled 2,000 people in a country of about 200 million people, the first reaction you get is, oh, the number is too small. Why didn't you do up to 10,000? Why didn't you do up to 20,000? Well, the idea behind sampling, or the theory of sampling in statistics, is that it depends on how you look at the sample. So the fact that you do 50,000 people does not give you a higher accuracy than if you did 2,000 people, if your sampling is wrong. And in this case, we sampled for age, we sampled for gender, and we corrected it for the population, in those states, to select who we polled. Now, in terms of the communities, how we defined a rural community, in my introduction, I said, we understand the classic definition, although there is no one definition of rural, but most scholars would look at everywhere that is outside the urban areas, and they would look at distance, from the urban areas. The US government in their population definition would look at rural communities as any place that has 50,000 population or less. In our case, we looked at distance from city centers. We also looked at institutions that define urbanity. And we use tertiary institution as one of those to say any local government area that has a tertiary institution, we eliminated it. So we went to places that are distant from city center. We also eliminated the city centers and went to places that are distant from it and places that did not have tertiary institutions. In terms of location where we polled, I think this might be the first time a pollster is releasing their location. So if you look at the reports that we shared, on the penultimate page, we included a link, which if you click on the link, you can drill down and see the exact location where our posters went to, because we use the tool that allows us to use GPS location to know exactly where the poster is. And if the poster is not where they're supposed to be, the tool did not accept the poll results. So in that way, we ensured that, one, they really went out, to do the poll, they went to the right places, and that they polled the right number of people for each age grouping, each gender grouping per the population of the area. The last question you asked was around the age. The groupings we used were 18 to 24, 25 to 34, 35 to 44, 45 to 54, 55 to 64, 65 to 74, and then 75 and above.
Okay, Patrick, look, let me understand something. What is the wisdom in excluding the home states of the 4 leading presidential candidates that this report looks at? Considering the fact that, how do you do a polling survey in Nigeria and you ignore Kano State, you ignore Lagos State, you ignore Anambra State, you ignore, do you get what I'm saying? So, in other words, that could raise questions about accuracy in terms of the true choice, of the people, even if here you say rural areas. Yes, we understand 72% of Nigerian population or whatever, are in the rural areas. But what is the wisdom in excluding the states of the leading candidates? Which will be their strong areas in any case?
Yeah. So again, every poll tests for something. Yeah. And what we wanted to test for was the average Nigerian in a rural community, quite remote from the influences of the major cities and social media. How do they think about this election? And we chose to remove the states of the leading candidates because it could introduce some bias, positive, to those leading candidates. We wanted to test the average Nigerian who does not have that affiliation of being from the same state of origin with any of the leading candidates. How does that average Nigerian think about this election? Now, there's a poll that we're already planning for mid-December. In that poll, we're polling all Nigerians. We're polling city center, we're polling rural communities, all the states in the country, face-to-face polling, right? And that will give a different slant. But this particular poll wanted to understand the average Nigerian who's not under the influence of affiliation, state of origin affiliation with the candidates, who's not under the influence of a lot of the messages that go through on social media, right smack in the middle of town. How do they feel about this? And that is what we're showing with these numbers. Different polls can poll for different things and find different results. But in this instance, that's why we excluded the home states of the leading candidates.